The restaurant's crystal chandeliers trembled as the gunshot shattered the silence. No, wait. That wasn't a gunshot. It was the sound of a champagne flute smashing against the marble floor, hurled by the CEO's hand as he leaned across the table, his face twisted in disgust. "You're a joke," he spat at the mechanic kneeling beside him, wiping the spilled wine from his cheap, calloused hands. "I gave you one job. One. Fix my car, not ruin it. And now you expect me to pay you?" The mechanic's jaw tightened, but he didn't look up. Not yet. His fingers, rough from years of grease and grit, clenched around something hidden in his pocket, a secret that could unravel everything. The CEO's laughter cut through the air like a blade, drawing the eyes of every patron in the exclusive restaurant. "Pathetic. Just like your father. Worthless then, worthless now." The words hung there, heavy, suffocating. But then, everything changed. The doors burst open. A masked man stormed in, his voice a growl. "Nobody move!" Chaos erupted. Women gasped. Men ducked. The CEO's security team froze, hands hovering over their weapons. But the mechanic? He didn't flinch. His voice was a whisper, so low only the CEO could hear it. "Don't move." The CEO's eyes widened. "What did you just—" Before he could finish, the mechanic's grip on the hidden object tightened. The camera zoomed in on his face, calm, almost serene, as the CEO's breath hitched. What did this broken, humiliated man know that no one else did? And why was the robber staring straight at him like they'd planned this all along? This isn't just a robbery. It's revenge. And the first move has already been made. If you love stories where the underdog outsmarts the powerful, where every whisper hides a storm, then you need to see what happens next. Smash that like button, subscribe for the twist you won't see coming, and turn on notifications. Because the next move? It's going to leave you speechless. The mechanic's hands were still shaking as he scrubbed the grease from under his fingernails in the dimly lit bathroom of his tiny apartment, the sink stained with rust and years of neglect. The CEO's words echoed in his skull like a hammer against steel. "Worthless. Just like your father." He could still see the sneer on the man's face, the way his security team had loomed behind him like shadows, ready to drag him out if he dared to speak another word. But it wasn't the humiliation that burned the most. It was the memory of his daughter's face, pale and gaunt, her small hands clutching the prescription bottle like it was the last lifeline in a storm. "Daddy, it hurts," she had whispered that morning, her voice barely audible over the rattling cough that racked her tiny body. The medicine was expensive, too expensive, and the CEO, he held the key to getting it for a price. 3 years earlier, the mechanic had been just another face in the crowd, a man trying to keep his head down and his family fed. But then came the accident. The black sedan, sleek and polished, had screamed through the red light, plowing into the mechanic's old truck with a crunch of metal that still haunted his dreams. His wife hadn't walked away from it. Neither had the CEO's reputation, at least not after the mechanic had seen the security footage the police lost. The CEO's driver had been drunk. The CEO had known. And with a single phone call, a single whispered threat, the case had vanished into thin air. "You don't want to make an enemy out of me," the CEO had told him, his voice smooth as oil, his eyes cold as the grave. "Think of your daughter." And he had. Every damn day. The mechanic splashed water on his face, the cold sting pulling him back to the present. The restaurant's napkin, crumpled in his pocket, still smelled of the CEO's expensive cologne, arrogance bottled and sold for a fortune. He pulled it out, smoothing it against the chipped countertop, his fingers tracing the embossed logo of the exclusive club where the man dined like a king while people like him starved. That napkin was more than fabric. It was proof. Proof that he'd been there. Proof that he'd heard the confession slip from the CEO's lips like poison. That mechanic's daughter. Let her rot. It'll teach him a lesson. A lesson, as if life hadn't already carved its lessons into his bones. The knock at the door was soft, almost hesitant. He knew who it was before he even turned the knob. His daughter stood there, her dark eyes too big for her thin face, her nightgown hanging loose on her shrinking frame. Daddy, the medicine. She didn't need to finish. He knew. The bottle was empty. The pharmacy had refused to refill it without payment. And the CEO, he'd laughed when the mechanic had begged for help earlier that day. You want money? Earn it. Fix my car, perfectly, or don't bother coming back. The car. That damn car. The mechanic crouched in front of his daughter, his calloused hands cupping her small face. I'll fix it, baby. I promise. But the promise tasted like ash in his mouth, because he knew. He'd seen the way the CEO's security team had watched him, the way their hands had twitched toward their holsters when he'd dared to raise his voice. They weren't just bodyguards. They were enforcers. And the mechanic? He was just another ant beneath the CEO's boot. But ants could bite, and sometimes they could bring down giants. He tucked his daughter into bed, pressing a kiss to her forehead before pulling the old frayed blanket up to her chin. Sleep, sweetheart. Daddy's got a plan. And he did. It had started with a phone call to an old contact, a cop who'd been forced out of the department after asking too many questions about the CEO's business deals. I need your help, the mechanic had said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. Not for me, for her. The cop had hesitated. Then, quietly, meet me at the old garage, midnight. The garage was a ghost of what it used to be, its windows boarded up, its tools rusted from disuse. But the cop was there, his face half hidden in the shadows. You know what you're asking? He'd said, his voice rough. This man doesn't just ruin lives, he ends them. The mechanic had nodded, his fingers tracing the outline of the small recorder in his pocket, the one he'd hidden under the table at the restaurant, the one that had captured every word the CEO had spat at him. I know, but he took everything from me. My wife, my daughter's health, my dignity. I'm not asking for justice. I'm asking for a chance to take something back. The cop had stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly he'd pulled a file from his jacket. The driver from the accident. He's not just a driver. He's the CEO's fixer, and he's got a weakness. The photo inside the file showed a man in a sharp suit, his face scarred, his eyes empty. He gambles, badly, and he owes the wrong people money. The mechanic's heart had pounded. How much? The cop's smile was grim. Enough to make him desperate. Enough to make him ours. The plan had formed in his mind like a spark in the dark. The restaurant, the robbery, the CEO's arrogance, his belief that he was untouchable. It was all a stage. And the mechanic? He was done being a pawn. But as he walked back into his apartment, the weight of what he was about to do settled over him like a shroud. His daughter's soft breathing filled the silence, a reminder of what he was fighting for, and what he was willing to lose. Tomorrow the CEO would learn what happened when you pushed a man too far. Tomorrow the world would see the giant fall. But first, he had to make sure his daughter would still have a father when the dust settled. The restaurant's air was thick with the scent of fear, sweat, perfume, and the metallic tang of adrenaline. The masked man stood at the center of the room, his gun sweeping over the terrified patrons like a scythe, his voice a low, controlled growl. All of you, phones on the table. Wallets, jewelry, now! The CEO's security team was frozen, their hands hovering over their concealed weapons, but they didn't move. Not yet. Because the man with the gun wasn't just some desperate thief. He was a professional, and professionals didn't make mistakes. The mechanic didn't flinch. He didn't reach for his phone. He didn't even look at the gun. His eyes were locked on the CEO, whose face had gone pale beneath his expensive tan. What the hell is this? The CEO hissed, his voice trembling with rage. The mechanic leaned in, his voice barely a whisper, but every word was a blade. This is justice. Before the CEO could react, the mechanic's hand shot out, slamming a small black device onto the table between them. A recorder. The red light blinked like a heartbeat. The CEO's breath hitched as his own voice filled the silence, sharp and cruel. That mechanic's daughter? Let her rot. It'll teach him a lesson. The gasps from the surrounding tables were like a chorus of horror. The CEO's face twisted, first in shock, Then in fury, "You set this up?" The mechanic didn't answer. He didn't need to. The masked man, no, the ex-cop, stepped closer, his gun still raised, but his eyes were on the CEO now. "You should have paid your debts, Richard." The CEO's name on his lips was a death knell. The room erupted. A woman screamed. A man bolted for the door, only to be stopped by the ex-cop's sharp command. Nobody leaves. The CEO's security team finally snapped into action, their hands reaching for their weapons, but the ex-cop was faster. A single shot rang out, not at them, but at the chandelier above. Crystal rained down like shards of ice, and the room plunged into chaos. The mechanic didn't move, he didn't need to. The recorder was still playing, and every word was a nail in the CEO's coffin. "You think this changes anything?" the CEO snarled, his voice shaking. "I'll bury you for this." The mechanic finally looked up, his eyes cold. "You already tried." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a single photograph. The scarred face of the CEO's fixer, the man who'd been driving the night of the accident. The man who'd left the mechanic's wife to die in the wreckage. "You remember him?" The CEO's face went slack. "He's been singing like a canary. And the police? They're very interested in what he has to say." The ex-cop smirked, his finger still on the trigger. "Turns out, Richard, your fixer's got a gambling problem. And gamblers talk when they're desperate." The CEO's hands clenched into fists. "You're bluffing." The mechanic shook his head. "Ask him yourself." He nodded toward the kitchen door. It swung open, and the fixer stumbled out, his face bruised, his suit rumpled. The CEO's breath came fast now, his eyes darting between the fixer and the mechanic like a trapped animal. "You traitor!" "I had no choice," the fixer snapped, his voice breaking. "They were going to kill me. You left me no choice." The room was dead silent. The CEO's empire was crumbling, and everyone there knew it. The mechanic leaned in, his voice a whisper only the CEO could hear. "You took my wife. You took my daughter's health. You took everything, but tonight I'm taking yours." The CEO's face twisted in rage. "You think this is over? You think you've won?" The mechanic didn't answer. He didn't need to. The sirens were already wailing in the distance. The ex-cop had made the call. The police were coming, and this time they weren't on the CEO's payroll. But then, something unexpected happened. The CEO's hand twitched toward his jacket. The mechanic's instincts screamed. "Gun!" The ex-cop lunged, but he wasn't fast enough. The CEO had a pistol, small and sleek, pressed against the mechanic's ribs before anyone could react. "You should have stayed in your place," he hissed, his breath hot against the mechanic's ear. The room was a powder keg. One wrong move, and it would all be over. The mechanic didn't flinch. He looked the CEO dead in the eye. "Then pull the trigger." The words hung there, heavy, final. The CEO's finger trembled on the trigger. The mechanic didn't look away. He wouldn't give him the satisfaction. "But you won't," he said softly, "because men like you only kill when you think you can get away with it. And tonight, the whole world's watching." The CEO's gaze flickered to the windows, where blue and red lights flashed against the glass. The police were here. The game was up. The mechanic smiled. Slow, cold, victorious. Checkmate. But then the CEO's lips curled into a smirk. "You think this is checkmate?" His voice was a venomous whisper. "You have no idea what you've just started. What do you think the CEO knows that the mechanic doesn't? Drop your theory in the comments, because the next move, it's going to change everything." The CEO's smirk was a blade in the dark, his fingers still trembling on the trigger, but his eyes were alight with something worse than rage, something colder, something calculated. "You think you've won?" he repeated, his voice a venomous purr. The mechanic didn't move, didn't blink, but his pulse roared in his ears. The police sirens were closer now, their wail cutting through the thick silence of the restaurant like a warning. The ex-cop had his gun trained on the CEO, his finger tight on the trigger, but the CEO didn't seem to care. He was looking at the mechanic like he was already a ghost. "You have no idea what you've just started," the CEO whispered. And then, he laughed. A sharp, bitter sound that sent a chill down the mechanic's spine. The gun at his ribs didn't waver, but the CEO's grip loosened just enough to slide a folded piece of paper into the mechanic's hand. "Read it," he said, his voice dripping with something like pity. "Then tell me who the real victim is here." The mechanic unfolded the paper with stiff fingers, his eyes scanning the words. His breath caught. It was a medical report. His daughter's name at the top, the hospital's logo stamped in the corner. But the diagnosis wasn't the one he knew. It wasn't the respiratory infection, the one they'd been treating for months. This was worse. This was a death sentence. Stage 4. Metastatic. The words blurred. His hands shook. "This isn't possible," he choked out, his voice breaking. The CEO's laugh was a knife twist. "Oh, it's possible. And you? You just signed her death warrant." The mechanic's vision tunneled. The restaurant, the guns, the police. It all faded into a roar of blood in his ears. "You're lying." His voice was raw, desperate. The CEO leaned in, his breath hot, his words a poisoned whisper. "Ask yourself, mechanic, why do you think I let you get this far? Why do you think I wanted you to record me? To expose me?" The mechanic's mind raced, pieces clicking into place like a trap snapping shut. The fixer's sudden confession, the ex-cop's too perfect timing, the way the CEO had let him play his hand step by step like a puppet on a string. "You set this up," the mechanic breathed, the realization hitting him like a freight train. The CEO's smile was a razor. "I needed you to think you'd won, because a man who thinks he's won, he stops looking for the real game." The mechanic's grip on the paper tightened, crumpling the edges. "What game?" The CEO's eyes flicked to the windows, where the police lights pulsed against the glass. "The one where you lose everything, starting with her." The doors burst open. Officers flooded in, guns drawn, shouting orders. The ex-cop lowered his weapon, his face pale. The CEO released the mechanic with a shove, his hands raised in mock surrender. "Officers! Thank God you're here. This man just threatened my life." The mechanic staggered, his mind reeling. The police were on the CEO in seconds, but their eyes kept flicking to him, to the gun still on the table, to the recorder. The mechanic's chest burned. He could barely breathe. "Sir, we need you to come with us," an officer said, his hand on his holster. The mechanic didn't resist. He didn't have the strength. The ride to the station was a blur. The cold metal of the handcuffs, the flashing lights, the murmurs of the officers, none of it mattered. All he could see was the medical report, the words seared into his mind. Stage 4. His daughter's face, her smile, the way she'd looked at him that morning, trusting him to fix this, to save her. And he'd walked right into the CEO's trap. The police station was a maze of fluorescent lights and stern faces. They shoved him into an interrogation room, the door slamming shut behind him. The detective across the table didn't look happy. "You've got a lot of explaining to do," he said, folding his arms. The mechanic didn't answer. He didn't care. None of it mattered if his daughter was... The door opened. The ex-cop stood there, his face grim. "We need to talk. Now." The detective scowled. "This isn't your case. It's all my case," the ex-cop snapped, his voice low, urgent. The mechanic's pulse spiked. "What did you do?" he demanded, his voice raw. The ex-cop didn't meet his eyes. "I did what I had to get him, to get all of them." The mechanic's stomach twisted. At what cost? The ex-cop finally looked at him, and the guilt in his eyes was a confirmation. "The CEO wasn't bluffing about your daughter." The mechanic's world tilted. "What did you do?" The ex-cop's voice was barely a whisper. "I made a deal with the wrong people." The mechanic's hands clenched into fists. "What deal?" The ex-cop swallowed hard. "The fixer wasn't the only one who owed money. I did too. And the people I owed. They wanted the CEO taken down, badly, so I gave them what they wanted. Proof, leverage, you." The mechanic's breath came in ragged gasps. "You used me." The ex-cop didn't deny it. "I used all of us, but I didn't know about your daughter. Not until it was too late." The mechanic's vision swam. The CEO's words echoed in his skull. You just signed her death warrant. What did you promise them? He whispered, already knowing the answer. The ex-cop's voice was a grave. Everything. Your recording, your testimony, her medical records. The mechanic's blood ran cold. Why? The ex-cop's face was ashen. Because they don't just want the CEO, they want his empire, and they'll burn anyone to get it. The mechanic's mind raced. His daughter, his fight, his mistake. Who are they? The ex-cop didn't answer. He didn't have to. The door burst open again. The detective was back, his face like thunder. You're free to go, he said, tossing a set of keys onto the table. The CEO's dropping all charges, and he's requesting a meeting, just you. The mechanic's heart stopped. Why? The detective's eyes were cold. Because he says he has a proposition, one you won't refuse. The ex-cop's hand shot out, gripping the mechanic's arm. Don't go. It's a trap. The mechanic looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the fear there, the guilt, the truth. But it didn't matter, because the CEO had his daughter's life in his hands. And the mechanic, he didn't have a choice. He stood, his legs unsteady, his mind a storm. Where? The detective's answer was a blade to the gut. The hospital, your daughter's room. The mechanic's breath left him. He would, the ex-cop said, his voice hollow. And he will. The drive to the hospital was a nightmare. The streets blurred past, the city lights a smear of neon and shadow. His daughter's face was all he could see. Her laugh, her tears, the way she'd looked at him like he could fix anything. And now he didn't know if he'd ever see her smile again. The hospital loomed ahead, its windows glowing like eyes in the dark. He didn't remember parking, he didn't remember running. All he knew was the sound of his own heart, the roar of blood in his ears, the cold dread coiling in his gut. Her room was at the end of the hall. The door was open. The CEO stood inside, his back to the mechanic, his hands clasped behind him like a king surveying his kingdom. And there, in the bed, was his daughter. Pale, still, too still. The mechanic's breath caught. No. The word was a prayer, a curse, a scream. The CEO turned, his smile a knife. Ah, there you are. His daughter's eyes fluttered open. Daddy? Her voice was weak, but she was alive. For now. The CEO gestured to the chair beside the bed. Sit. We have much to discuss. The mechanic didn't move. What did you do to her? The CEO's smile didn't waver. Me, nothing, yet. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a syringe, the liquid inside glowing faintly under the fluorescent lights. But time is running out, for both of you. The mechanic's hands clenched. What do you want? The CEO's eyes were cold. The same thing you do. He held up the syringe. A second chance. The syringe gleamed under the harsh hospital lights, its contents a swirl of hope and poison, salvation and surrender. The mechanic's eyes locked onto it, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. His daughter's breath was shallow, her small hand limp in his, her fingers cold. Daddy, she whispered, her voice barely audible, her eyes pleading. The CEO stood over them like a shadow, his smile a blade, his power absolute. This, he said, holding the syringe higher, is the only thing that can save her, the only thing I can give you. The mechanic's mind raced, memories of his wife's last words, of his daughter's laughter, of every sleepless night spent praying for a miracle. And now here it was, in the hands of the man who had destroyed him. What's the price? The mechanic asked, his voice raw, broken. The CEO's laugh was a slow, venomous thing. You already know. He stepped closer, his polished shoes clicking against the linoleum, his presence suffocating. You work for me, not as a mechanic, not as a pawn. His voice dropped to a whisper. As my weapon. The mechanic's stomach twisted. He'd spent years fighting this man, hating him, dreaming of his downfall, and now he was being asked to become the very thing he despised. The CEO's eyes gleamed. You'll do the jobs no one else can, the dirty ones, The ones that keep my hands clean. He leaned in, his breath hot, his words a poisoned promise. And in return, your daughter lives. She gets the best doctors, the best treatments, a future. The mechanic looked down at his daughter's face, her skin too pale, her cheeks hollow. He could almost see the ghost of her smile, the way her eyes used to light up when he walked into the room. "Daddy, please," she murmured, her voice fading. The syringe was right there. A lifeline. A chain. The CEO's voice was a serpent's hiss. "Tick-tock, mechanic. Every second you waste is a second she loses." His hands trembled. He could feel the weight of the choice pressing down on him, crushing him. If he said yes, he'd be selling his soul. If he said no, he'd be signing her death certificate. The CEO's patience was wearing thin. Decide. The word was a command, a sentence, a noose tightening around his neck. The mechanic closed his eyes, his mind flooding with images. His wife's last breath, his daughter's first steps, every moment of joy and pain that had led him here. He thought of the man he used to be, the man who believed in justice, in right and wrong. That man was gone. All that was left was a father who would do anything. His eyes snapped open. "Give me the syringe." The CEO's smile was triumphant. Smart choice. He handed it over, their fingers brushing for a fraction of a second, a deal sealed in silence. The mechanic didn't hesitate. He uncapped the needle, his hands steady now, his focus absolute. His daughter's eyes were wide, afraid, but she didn't pull away. She trusted him. Always. The needle slid into her IV port with a quiet click. The CEO watched, his satisfaction palpable. "Welcome to the family," he murmured, as if this were a blessing and not a curse. The minutes stretched like hours. The mechanic didn't move, didn't breathe. His eyes locked on his daughter's face, willing her to live, to fight. And then, her fingers twitched. Her breath deepened. A flicker of color returned to her cheeks, her lips parting as her eyes fluttered open. Clearer now. Brighter. "Daddy!" Her voice was stronger. Alive. The mechanic's chest tightened, relief and horror warring inside him. He'd saved her. And in doing so, he damned himself. The CEO clapped him on the shoulder, his touch like ice. "She'll make a full recovery. And you..." He turned, walking toward the door, his voice trailing behind him like a shadow. "You'll be hearing from me soon." The mechanic didn't look up. He couldn't. His daughter was alive. That was all that mattered. That was everything. And yet, as he held her hand, as he listened to her soft, steady breathing, he felt the weight of the chains he'd just forged around his own soul. The CEO was gone. The room was quiet. His daughter squeezed his hand, her grip weak but warm. "I love you, Daddy," she whispered. The words were a knife to his heart. He pressed his forehead to hers, his eyes burning. "I love you too, baby," he choked out, his voice breaking. He'd won. He'd lost, and the world would never know the difference. Outside, the city lights flickered against the night sky, indifferent to the bargains made in the dark. The mechanic sat there, his daughter's hand in his mind a storm of what he'd done and what he'd become. He'd started this fight for justice, for redemption, for her. And now, he was the monster's blade. There would be no going back, no forgiveness, no escape. Only the cold, unshakable truth he'd do it all again for her. Always for her. What would you have done in his place? Would you have made the same choice, or would you have let fate take its course? Drop your answer in the comments, because some decisions aren't just hard, they're impossible. And this one, it'll haunt you long after the screen fades to black. Like, share, and let's talk. Because the real question isn't what he chose. It's what you would have done.